Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Sarah Traver. I'm the director here at Traver Gallery, and I am very happy to be here with our featured artist, Ann Wåhlström. Ann is an incredibly accomplished artist, both in her sculptural work and her design work. She's somebody that we have known for many years and have been connected to probably my whole life, honestly. Or just about, but this is her first solo show in the gallery. So Ann, thank you so much. It's a really beautiful exhibition, and we're really happy to be able to walk through it with you and talk a little bit about more your experience and the work itself. Can you start by telling us maybe just a little bit about how you got involved in glass and what your connection is here in the Pacific Northwest?
Well, the connection is crucial for my glass work, and I had started becoming a glassblower in Sweden in the late 70s, and then there was an opportunity to come to this magic place called Pilchuck that I had heard about. So I came here summer of '79 the first time, and that changed basically everything, because for me it was new world meeting old world. And I was training in a very traditional way, trying to, get the craft into my fingers. And here it was so different. It was the idea first and then try to solve how you do it. It was sort of the other way of working. So that was fascinating to me. And it gave me really another leg to stand on, I felt. So.
Will you talk just a little bit more? I mean, I think our audience tends to be really familiar with the American studio glass movement, and that notion of idea first and then let the technique be in support of that idea. Can you share a little bit more about the more European sort of methodology and what it meant to be a designer working in glass?
Well, I didn't see myself as a designer in the beginning, because I was making the glass. I was trying to, make my idea, and I was really trying to make it perfect. But slowly and surely, when I had gone back and forth between America and Sweden, different schools and so on, beginning of the 80s, and lived in New York, making my glass myself, I had an offer to work as a designer for Costa Boda. And I thought, maybe not. I want to do it myself. And then thinking about it for a few weeks, I realized, well, if I step into this other role, I will have the opportunity to try so many more ideas. So I said yes. And I thought I should stay for a couple of years. It became 20.
Oh, wow.
For this glassworks that had many factories at the time. Wonderful. So then I realized that I needed to communicate to the glassblowers. So I had to start working my ideas on paper. Otherwise, there was no way to explain how to do things, or we had nothing to talk about, if there was no drawing.
Right. And so there are a couple examples here. Some of these, the ones that Deb has the camera on right now, these are more of your kind of sketches and a loose kind of generative idea making process.
Yes.
But they're not necessarily the ones that you would hand over to the glassblowers to communicate a very specific idea. Is that right?
Yes. And now we move up to current times, and working as a designer in the factory, you had a very wide palette of what was the possibility of products to make. So anything from wine glasses to plates and bowls, and then up to sort of the top of the pyramid, the art glass. So for the art glass, you could do much more loose drawings. For a wine glass, obviously, you had to make very specific renderings so they could order molds. But slowly and surely, and since I left the glassworks in 2005, I have tended to really be drawn to looser work and more artistic expressions. And now I work a lot with a fantastic team at Museum of Glass in Tacoma. So when I have an exhibition, I make sure I can get a time with them.
So you come from Sweden to Tacoma?
Yes.
To make work here
Yes.
with that particular team?
Yes, for certain exhibitions, yes.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
And we've sort of formed a bit of a bond over the last, could it be, almost 15 years. And also in Sweden, I have opportunities to work with a great team for similar work, but maybe more commissions and things like that.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at some of the pieces. Can you talk a little bit about your inspiration for this work and your approach to thinking about it?
Well, for many, many years, I've been drawn to this drop shape, and I've used it over and over in various versions with either no decoration or sparingly. And for these pieces, I have, together with these stone pieces that I started making a few years ago, gone into some sort of underwater world, almost. I spend my summers on an island in the Baltic, and on the shores there are often sort of big boulders in the water with seaweed sort of floating back and forth on them. And, you know, it sort of put some ideas in my head, and I've always looked at creatures underwater. So even back in the early 80s, actually, when I had the opportunity to visit the Great Barrier Reef with my father, who was living in Australia. And, you know, this world under there is just endless inspiration. So it's my underwater world in a way.
It's wonderful. I mean, I really see how you use the glass and the sort of optical qualities of the glass to capture that feeling of water, that like where it goes from like a thicker surface to a thinner surface. And I mean, it feels watery. It feels like you're looking through something at something else. It's like somewhat like morphed or changed because of the water on top of it.
I'm glad you say that too, because my drawings are watercolor, and since I do the drawings on wet paper, it sort of floats out. And then when I communicate with the glass blowers on how to approach it, of course I wanted to work with these techniques that I know they're so good at, you know, Italian murrinis and canes and everything, but I wanted to do it in a much softer way. Yeah. And they do, I think, resemble most of the time some feeling in my watercolors.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a looseness and like a gestural quality, I think. I see it a lot in this one, and it's interesting because for those people who know glassworking techniques, you think of murrini and cane work as being very tight.
And
usually.
precise,
Very precise. And here you've used it in a way where it really does emulate the drawn line or the painted line.
Yes.
Almost as though somebody's taken a brush and just very loosely created this drawing. Yeah, people who don't know glass often wonder if it's painted on, of course. So yeah, that's the excitement. And I mean, I'm a glass person, so I never get tired of the process in the hot shop and seeing where it goes, you know? Sure. And can you talk a little bit about how you approach color in your work? Because there is quite a bit of color in here, but it's a very like constrained color palette. Mm-hmm. I seem to, well, for a while, a few years ago, I only worked in this sort of graphic gray, white, black scale. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, I was very colorful for a few years. This time I thought, well, I want to introduce a few colors into this gray world. And it's always been like this with me. Certainly I long for a color. Mm-hmm. And this time it was pink. And
this sort of cool yellow I was trying to get that's almost greenish, lime green, and I just stuck to my gut feeling. So it's not super, you know, thought out. It's just I had a flavor. I longed for this palette right now, and it goes really well, of course, with the more graphic gray, white. So I've had fun.
I can tell. And what about the display? I mean, this is a very unusual display for us. We typically will place objects on individual pedestals, and here you have opted to kind of bring them together and in relationship with each other. How do you think about that? I know this is a display that you've used in some other exhibitions that you've had in the Swedish Gallery and elsewhere.
Yeah.
But what do you achieve with this that is not achieved just on the individual pedestals?
The fact you mentioned that they sort of become, they talk to each other. I like to display pieces in groups, and they're a family, and they're sort of little siblings. And I've actually always almost had larger surfaces to play on as opposed to putting them up individually. I just like it, and I hope it works here because it becomes a little different maybe, but yeah, I see them as friends.
They are, and there's a really wonderful thing that happens again with that I think is so unique to the glass and the way you use the glass. Like you get this incredible play of light or projection from the piece, and it just kind of spills across this surface, which I think again enhances that sort of painterly feel to the work.
And the water surface.
And the water surface that reflected.
That's why I call the exhibition currents, because it's like stream, or you know, the water reflection you get on the surface.
Do you have any favorite pieces in the show?
Oh,
sorry, I didn't give you a warning that I was going to ask you that.
Well, since I haven't worked with the stones for so long, I think it's somewhere here in this world. Yeah. I also like that we can sort of make them uneven and a little wobbly. So it is a little bit of two worlds here. It's this sort of stone wobbliness, and then it's a pretty pristine vessel drop shape that coexist in here. But I think right now I think I'm somewhere there.
Yeah, they're really interesting. I mean, and I love also that transition from the sort of what we think of as a traditional blown object, which has a vessel at the top, and then this kind of inverting that form.
Yeah.
And looking at it just purely as sculpture. And
yes.
that relationship between the two, I think is really, I mean, it's something that we see all the time here in the gallery working with a lot of glass artists, but you don't often see them side by side like this.
Right.
And that relationship and how they can be, you know, one and the same.
No, I think they do work together, and I had an exhibition in Oslo last year with only stones, and that was fun too, but I think this was good. Yeah, I'm happy.
Me too. And then there's a few little small pieces as well.
Yeah, that started a few years ago when we were playing around after having blown a big piece at the Museum of Glass, and the team said, oh, there's a little left on the pipe here with nice pattern. So there were a few that were made like that in the beginning, but that didn't really work as a system because we didn't get enough of those little extra bits. So I started making small ones that are just from the beginning with the pattern. So of course they're smaller, but it's basically the same amount of work for smaller pieces. So. But I love that you could go down in scale, because I wasn't so sure if it would work, but I think it does.
Absolutely.
So they're called the minis.
So, Ann, what do you have on the horizon? Do you have any projects you're working on or things you're looking forward to?
Well, I'm having a busy month. When I come back, I have a commission that has been waiting because of COVID, and it's large bubbles, clear, hanging from the ceiling.
Oh, cool.
And they are from another installation a few years ago at the Jewish Theatre in Stockholm that was a sort of stage set in glass. And it was for a piece by Steve Reich. It was called Different Trains, and there was a whole room about the size of this gallery actually, just packed with hanging drops and drops lying on the floor, individually lit to the music. And the glass is now donated by the theater to a hospital in Stockholm that is rebuilding their entrance. So the hanging ones are going to be sort of above people when they come into the hospital. So it's going to be quite an installation.
Sounds
but it's public art, yeah.
That's
so that's what's on the agenda, together with some design jobs for a flower company in Sweden. And then I'm working with a small factory, a traditional factory in Sweden. So then I don't know.
Well, that's amazing. And maybe just share a little bit, your relationship with the Northwest. I mean, you said you first came to Pilchuck in the 70s. You're basically here pretty much every year. I mean, there was
almost,
a couple year hiatus because of the pandemic, but typically we get to see you just about every summer.
No, it's been fantastic to be able to come here. And both me and my husband, Larry, who helps me a lot, we're very, very fond of Seattle. And it's because we met here, and it's a second place in our heart.
Yeah, and that connection with the glass community here in Seattle is quite deep. I mean, you worked with Dale.
Yes, I was a student of Dale, also on the East Coast in 1980 at Rhode Island School of Design, and he's been an incredible inspiration, I must say, all these years. Still is. And also I want to say, and this is really important, that the development of the skill of glassmaking here, when I came in 1979, I thought, they don't do it, as the Europeans do it. And slowly and surely, of course, the worlds have met.
Yeah.
Very much. Yeah. And so much knowledge has been brought from Murano, from Sweden, from Czech to this region, and this region is now top of the world, I would say. So that's also fun to have been following and almost being part of this development over, what is it now? 30 years or something more?
50.
Yeah.
Pilchuck just celebrated their 50th anniversary.
That's right.
So,
and I was there in 79.
And that really was kind of the inception glass in the Pacific Northwest.
So I think that is fantastic, and I think it's also very important for the old world, knowing that the new world has adopted so much of knowledge and is sort of, how do you say, taking on the baton, or yeah,
absolutely.
So unbelievable, I think.
Well, we're thrilled to have your work here in the gallery, and this show will be up through December 23rd, so encourage all of you to come in and see it in person. Of course, as always, the work is so much more beautiful in person, and you get to experience these colors and lights and shadows and the way they shift as you move around the pieces. But then it is in camera. But thank you for joining us, and for those of you who are on the East Coast, I hope that this gives you some sort of an approximation of what this incredible installation looks like. And thanks again. We're really, really proud to have the work here.
And thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everybody. Thanks for joining us.